Hello and welcome to this Mirror Facebook Live on what's pushing up your household bills the most and what you can do about it. I'm Sam Barker, a money reporter here at the Mirror. I'm hugely grateful to be joined today by consumer champion Isabel Lawrence from financial expert Money Magpie. Hello, Isabel.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
No, thank you very much. So together we're going to be breaking down the latest news on rising bills, everything we know about the future of these bills, and all the help available to help you save some money. But we're also here to answer your questions. So if you have anything you'd like to ask us, or if you just want to have your opinion heard, feel free to post in the chat. We are monitoring it and we will do our best to get back to you and answer you. So the latest news is that UK inflation has climbed to 10.1% in the 12 months to July as the cost of living crisis continues to squeeze household finances. This 10.1% figure, to put that in perspective, that is 5 times higher than the Bank of England's target for inflation, which is 2% a year. So let's start with some of the basics, then we'll get into the details, and then we'll get into the money saving. So Isabel, can you explain for us what is inflation and why should we be worried about it, please?
So inflation is basically the value of your money. So, for example, I always use the example of, say you want to buy a £100 television and you're saving up for it, and then by the time you've saved £100, you come to buy it and it's £110 because of inflation. So your money, your £100 can buy less than it could before. So it's basically the value of your money, and the higher the inflation, the less your money's worth, basically. So goods and services go up in price to keep up with inflation. So before, you might be able to get a bus ticket for £3 and now it's £5. So you have to use more money to buy what you could before, essentially. Now, what you should worry about, the reason we should be worried about it is because it, as we've seen and as you might have experienced, it's pushing the price of goods, services up to extortionate levels. Some prices are rising by 10%, 10.1% to keep up with this. And it's just not sustainable. And as you said, it's so much higher. It's 5 times higher than the 2% base rate that the Bank of England hoped for. So it kind of gets to a point where you think, right, I cannot afford food, I cannot afford fuel, I can't afford my energy bills because inflation is so high. And that's when you start to sort of think, right, what can we do about this? And how can we bring inflation back down so that life isn't, so expensive for us all?
I'm with you. And so when we're talking about inflation, when we say, inflation is 10.1%, that is just a top line average figure. And within that, there's hundreds of different things which the Office for National Statistics kind of looks at every month to work out how much inflation is going up on average. But what we can do is kind of break those figures down and work out the things that are, rising in price the most, the things that are pushing up household bills the most. And what we've basically found this month is that there are 3 main things, and some of them are probably going to be no surprise to the viewers kind of on this channel. But Isabel, can you talk us through what are the 3 big things which are currently pushing up these bills the most, please?
So, of course, the thing on everyone's minds at the moment is energy bills. The energy price cap increased in April by 54%. So we've all felt huge impact of that, and it's set to go up again in October. That's kind of the forefront of everyone's minds. Of course, if you've got a car, you'll have noticed fuel's gone up an extortionate amount, petrol and diesel. I think the family car, to fill up an average family car now is £100, which is very expensive amount of money for people to be spending on fuel, and of course food costs, they're at the highest they've been for 40 years, and that's something that that's kind of an everyday cost that we see day to day, buying food for ourselves and our families and our friends and things like that. So they're the big 3 that have really been on people's minds at the moment.
I'm with you, and we've got thank you for taking us through that. And we've got a comment here from Lise Lou. Lisa, thank you very much for commenting. She says, I can't even afford to eat every day because of the price of food, and then goes on to say the government need to do more. Lisa, obviously, our hearts go out to you. There are an awful lot of people, very sadly, who are in the same position. One of the things that we've seen this month, and this is kind of, energy bills are high. We knew that. We are going to go into a little bit about what you might be able to do about that. Petrol costs, although they're coming down off their peak, so the big 3 things pushing up inflation at the moment: energy bills, fuel, and this is a new one, food. So food prices have been rising, but this is the first month that food has entered the kind of top 3 things rising in price the fastest. So it's something that's been a bit of a slow burner. I think a lot of the attention has actually been on energy bills, which is obviously the biggie. But obviously, things like energy and things like food, obviously, very, very difficult things to cut back on. I'm sorry to hear that. Sorry to hear you're in that situation. Hopefully, we're going to have some advice during this call about ways that you might be able to save a little bit of money. So if there's anything new in there that you haven't tried or you haven't read about, I'd invite you to give it a go. So on that note, Isabel, perhaps if we take these three things in order, let's talk about some of the ways we might be able to save money here. Perhaps if we start with energy bills, what's some of your tips on perhaps starting to take some of the sting out of these if possible?
So the big thing that I just learned recently, actually, I learned from a boiler professional. He said that your boiler temperatures should be on 55 degrees for heating and water. Now, obviously, you can change these slightly if it's a bit too cold, but they're the kind of most efficient level for your boiler to be on. Most boilers are automatically on about 75 degrees, which is way too hot. If you're finding that you're having to add cold water to your bath water or your washing up water, if you're having to add a lot of cold water, then your water's too hot. So that's just the first thing I'd say. Check your boiler temperatures, make sure they're not too high, because that can really change the efficiency of your boiler. And also turn your thermostat down very slightly. That can really save you about £80 a year on your energy bills. So a huge amount of money at the moment. It's kind of finding things that can save you bits here and there. There's no one answer. There's no one big thing we can save on. But things like turning your radiators down very slightly and putting tin foil behind them, it stops the heat going through the wall the other side and really heats up the room. So you're not losing any heat. It's kind of like a makeshift insulation. And you can just get tin foil from the supermarket, the 50p roll of it, that will work fine. Things like if you've got drafts in your doors and your windows, covering them up with whatever you have. You don't have to go out and buy new curtains to do this. Maybe secondhand curtains. Maybe you've got a pair of curtains in the garage that you haven't used in a while. Even just towels, blankets that you can hang up in front of windows and doors that have a lot of draft coming through in the evening. That just keeps the heat in your home. And of course, there's things like electric blankets as well. They are a small investment, but they will save you a lot of money on heating bills in the long run. And you can get these on, marketplaces online secondhand. They're quite safe nowadays. There's a temperature stopper, so if they get to a certain temperature, they'll turn themselves off, so no risk of fire. So that's kind of keeping warm. When it comes to things like cooking, the kitchen is the room in the house that you use a lot of energy. Of course, the oven, the fridge, washing machines, tumble dryers, they use extortionate amounts of energy. I've been saying to people, if you have a tumble dryer, try not to use it unless it's absolutely urgent. Maybe for big things like bedding, blankets, use it for those. But don't be putting it on twice a day to dry your clothes if you can avoid it. They use up a lot of money, really a lot of money. And you can go without them if possible. Hang things on radiators. Again, heated airers, they're an investment, but you can get them online for quite a low price, and they cost not that much to run, pennies to run a day, and they sort of will dry your laundry quicker. So there's sort of a lot of little things here and there that you can do. Even things like if you're boiling potatoes or carrots, cutting them smaller so the boiling time's less, or if you're make a couple of meals in one go using the oven, so you only have to turn the oven on once and then heat them throughout the week in the microwave. It just saves pennies here and there, and you think, oh, okay, well, it's only saving me a tenner, it's only saving me 20 quid. If you're saving £10, £20, £80 here and there, you're gonna have a big saving overall, and every penny helps at the moment. So it's definitely worth thinking about these things.
Absolutely, no, I couldn't agree more. And I just echo what Isabel said. Saving money when we're talking about energy, this is all about, it's a game of inches. Because you won't be able to switch away to a better energy deal. It's almost impossible. Your current provider might be able to offer you a kind of a slightly secretive deal that you wouldn't be able to get on the open market. Chances of you being able to get a better energy deal than you're on now are very, very slim. And most households are now on variable rate energy deals. So the more energy you use, the more you pay. Whereas if you turn the clocks back 2 years, or even maybe 1 year, most households were on fixed rate energy deals where within a certain boundary, your energy usage didn't affect how much you paid as much. So really, it's going to be a question of cutting down as much as you can on the energy that you use if you're trying to bring. That's the main thing that you can do to help bring some of these energy bills down. Now we're hoping that there will be more government cost of living help announced, particularly for energy bills. We're going to get into that if we've got a little bit of time towards the end of the call. The two candidates, their announcements on this change all the time, but it is clearly the number one thing on their agenda. But we can't bet on that. So the best thing you can do as kind of consumers, people looking to take action, is to basically to look at a lot of different things that will hopefully add up to a bigger thing, dragging your energy bills down. So we've covered off energy bills there. Thank you very much, Isabel. But there's obviously, there are two other big things at the moment which are pushing up household outgoings, and one of those is petrol and diesel. So Isabel, do you mind taking us through, what are some of the ways that if you run a car, you need to run this car, what are some of the ways that you might be able to save a little bit of money there?
So the thing I always say to people is if you are using your car to go to work or perhaps take children to school, car share where possible. Even if you car share 2-3 days a week, you're cutting your petrol in half for that particular journey. If you make sure you check the efficiency of your tires, again, there's a couple of things that I'm saying that I do understand you have to sort of put a little bit of money towards it first, but in the long run it will save you money. So I do understand not everyone will be able to do these immediately, but things like checking the tire pressure on your car can really affect the fuel efficiency and how much fuel is used. Having anything heavy in the back of your car, the heavier your vehicle, the more fuel you're going to be using up. So if you've got an old camping gear or something in the back that's been rolling around for a couple of weeks, just take that out because it really does save you money on your fuel. Also things like taking the bus where you can, walking where you can. I know I probably sound like a broken record to people saying, take the bus or walk instead, but it really can help. Even if you just take the bus 1 day a week instead of driving to work and back, just to save that little bit of money on petrol. But like I said, car sharing is really a great way to do this. You can also, I saw recently, if you add a named driver on your insurance, your annual premium can actually decrease. So that's something to think about, especially if the driver's older than you or has been driving for longer than you. That can kind of bring your annual total down. So just something to think about there as well. And things like you can compare petrol prices online. There is websites that you can compare prices in your area, go to the one that's the cheapest. Obviously, I'm not saying, drive 20 miles down the road to get the cheapest petrol because that won't, be efficient. But things like that, they just really help here and there. Even if you're saving a couple of pennies on your, per litre of fuel, it does add up. And, it's every little helps at the moment, like I've been saying. And it's just sort of making the savings here and there where you can. If you even have a car in your drive that you think, I only use it once a week, could you go without it? Could you, sell your car altogether? I know it's quite nice to have the comfort of having a car, but if you really don't use it often, maybe consider selling it. You can also share your car, so people can come and insure themselves on your car for a day a week if they need it, and that can give you a little bit of money, and then they cover the cost of petrol as well. So there's lots of ways you can save on your car and your vehicles too.
That's great, and thank you. And I just want to, before we kind of go through some more kind of money saving tips for you, just wanted to take a quick look at the comments. We've got a comment here from Amy Whitfield. Thank you very much, Amy. Amy says, there is no help for people who work full-time but earn too much to claim benefits. So Amy, thank you very much for commenting, and thank you to everybody who has commented. Please do keep it coming. I couldn't agree more with you. The government, a lot of the government help that's been announced so far has been targeted at people on earnings-based state benefits. And the government's thinking is that, these are the people that need it the most, therefore, and we've got a system in place, government system in place to contact these people. We know their bank details. It's quite an easy thing for us to an expensive thing, but an easy thing for us to set up a system to, deliver them pots of money to help with the rising cost of living. But obviously there are, an awful lot of people who, such as yourself, and we, it's probably one of the things that we hear the most on the Money team here at the Mirror, and from the comment sections that we see on these Facebook Lives, is people who say, well, this is all great, and I'm grateful that, the government is doing something for the most hard up people in society, but I'm not exactly flush, and, I'm not quite, earning, I'm above the cut-off point to perhaps get benefits, and I am struggling, and I'm entitled to very little. And all I would say to that is, I completely understand, I sympathise with where you're coming from. I would also say watch this space, because some of the things that particularly Liz Truss has been saying, if Liz Truss does become the Prime Minister, Liz Truss is leaning, it seems, slightly more towards things like tax cuts. So to help with the cost of living, and obviously tax cuts, you say here, you work full time. Tax cuts really are more of a kind of a sop aimed at people who are in work. So, it may well be nothing's been pinned down. She may not become the Prime Minister, but if she does, it does look like she's leaning in that direction. And I strongly suspect that wouldn't be where she would stop as well. So, as I say, watch this space, because we won't even know who the new Prime Minister is going to be until the first week of September. But thank you very much for your comment, and as I say, we're all thinking of you. So Isabel, just also wanted to cover off, the final one of the big three things, which is pushing up household bills at the moment, and that's food. So as I said earlier on the call, food, the price of food is actually increasing in rate, whereas things like petrol, they've become very high and now they're coming down. Food has been very steadily climbing, almost in the background, almost imperceptibly, and it's now, adding quite a substantial wedge onto all of our outgoings. So, you obviously looked at this subject, quite in depth. Can you talk us through, some of the ways that people might be able to bring down those weekly shopping bills, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, I'm sure many of us make shopping lists, and that's a really good way to save money. Making a shopping list and really, being disciplined and saying, right, I'm really going to stick to this, is a really great way to save money. In fact, people that meal plan, they save about £25 a week on food, which is £100 a month. So meal planning and just buying what you need for your meals and your snacks and packed lunches and things like that can really save you a good chunk of money every month. So that's the first thing I'd say. And I always go shopping when I'm hungry, and it's bad because I always end up picking up little bits here and there that I think, oh, that looks nice, that looks nice. Don't go shopping when you're hungry, because you are hungry and you pick up more things. Also, things like just go to your local supermarket and ask a worker, when do you put your yellow sticker items out? It'll be sort of the same time every day, but it differs store to store. So just ask them, when do you put your reduced stuff out? And they should let you know. And, go and see what you can find. You can get some really good reductions in different supermarkets. That's one place. There's also really good food sharing apps now available. There's Too Good To Go and there's Olio. So Too Good To Go is supermarkets and restaurants that, towards the end of the day, they say, right, we've got loads of this and it's going to go off tomorrow. So they put it in, they're called magic bags. They're about £2 to £5, but you can get loads of stuff. I've got one from a supermarket before that I think it was about £3. And I got loads of bread and like ham and cheese and things like that. I could freeze all the bread. You can freeze cheese as well. So that's a really good idea. And of course, if you really are struggling, there is local food bank help. Sometimes you do need a sort of reference for food banks, I think, and you can get these from churches, community groups. So go to them and say, look, I need a reference for the food bank. Please, can you help me out? I don't know if people might know this already, but we've had a couple of emails saying, my child gets free school meals during term time. What can I do during the holidays? And it surprised me that a lot of people, the government aren't letting people know that if you get free school meals in term time, you can get food vouchers to use during school holidays. Now, I'm sure a lot of parents are aware of this already, but it did surprise me how many people didn't know. So you go to your local authority and they can give you £15 a week per child, and you can spend it in 7 of the top supermarkets across the UK. So that's another thing. And also, we're really trying to push something at Money Magpie about sort of befriending your neighbours and helping your neighbours out and kind of creating a community. If you're about to go on holiday, for example, or you're about to go away for a couple of days, and you've got loads of stuff in your fridge that's going to go off, see if your neighbours want it, and say to them, they might do the same for you. Same with if you grow things in your garden, share with your neighbours, and it really creates this sort of sharing community, and you can kind of look out for each other. And I think that's really important. It's kind of, back in the day, people knew their neighbours, and now I feel like there's sort of like a distance from your neighbours, but it can really help to, get to know them and share in that way. And even if, you say, here's some food, and then they might remember that and come back to you at a later date when they've got a lot. So kind of just talking to people. Like I said, if you can grow food, even if you've just got a windowsill or a little balcony or a patio, you can get sort of big pots that you can grow tomatoes in, lettuces, things like that. So I know it's not super easy for everyone, but if you do have the space or you want to give it a go, that's something to think about as well. But yeah, sort of writing a list, sticking to it, making a budget as well, and trying to stick to it. Also buying own brand items. I know Asda have just launched a new Just Essentials brand, which is really good quality for the price as well. So just sort of shopping around and using price comparison websites for supermarkets too.
That's great. Thank you very much for for taking us through some of that. And there's certain things that you were saying there, and it is kind of just reminded me of something, which is that a lot of the things that you say, it almost seems like our grandparents probably had it right. In a lot of ways, when it comes to saving money today, things like electric blankets. Someone's posted in the comments, how much does an electric blanket actually cost to run? Pennies. They are so cheap because they're heating up quite a small area and they're not really getting that hot. They're only really obviously designed to heat you. If it gets really cold, obviously you do still need to heat your house up as well because you don't want burst pipes. But once you've got over that initial outlay, they're very cheap. But it does seem like the way that particularly our grandparents' generation and beyond kind of used to live when it comes to dragging food out, doing these kind of batch cooks and kind of eating off that. I think there's an awful lot of advice that we could probably take from from the older generations, and also people who've kind of been through this sort of thing before. So I think there are a few little things that you said there that sort of reminded me slightly of some of the older members of my certainly of my family. Now, I just wanted to let's talk a little bit about the future, and then we can give you, hopefully, if we've got time, just a little bit of a recap on some of the government help available and what could be coming down the pipeline from the new Prime Minister. So, unfortunately, the future for inflation, so the rising cost of living, does not look good, at least for a couple of years. So the Bank of England has warned that inflation could rise from around 10%, which is where it is now, to around 13.3% in October, and that's to do mostly with the rising energy price cap, which will be coming in October. So to fight rising inflation, so the Bank of England's cure is to make steady increases to its base rate. Now, this is one of those situations where the cure is as bad as the disease, at least for the short term, for an awful lot of people. So the Bank of England's plan is that if it puts base rate up, this will bring inflation down, bring the cost of living down, because households will be less likely to spend their money, and more likely to save it, cooling the economy and lowering inflation. But there is a cost to this because the Bank of England is doing this because bills are going up. But putting base rate up can also increase your bills because if you have a mortgage or you have a loan, you will end up paying more. Although if you are lucky enough to have some spare cash lying around, you will also earn more in interest on savings when base rate goes up. So the Bank of England, like we said earlier, it tries to keep inflation at around about 2% a year every year. For many years, it was quite successful at doing that, and obviously has just completely lost control of it now. The Bank of England thinks that inflation will not fall back to 2% for another 2 years. So high inflation combined with rising base rate will leave a lot of struggling households. We hear a lot from what I'd call the squeezed middle sometimes, in these Facebook lives. It leaves a lot of households struggling, and they're caught between a rock and a hard place because high inflation means we're paying high prices today. That's why we're all on this call. But you also face paying above average prices, perhaps for as long as 2 years, all the while that rising base rate, obviously the Bank of England's cure, means that any loans or mortgage repayments you make risk going up in price, long before inflation starts to fall significantly. So unfortunately, if that was, you just need a little recap of what I've just said there, it means that bills are going to keep going up, unfortunately. But hopefully, there is a kind of a government plan, a very slow one, to help get things back on track. Now, I just wanted to have a very, very quick recap about some of the government help coming down the pipeline to help with the cost of living. So obviously, if you are on means-tested benefits, a list of means-tested benefits, you are entitled to £650 from the government this year to help with the rising cost of living. The first half has been paid out, or should have been paid out, in July. There are a few stragglers where the government hasn't quite made those payments yet. The second instalment will be due in the autumn, and the government haven't yet said when we might expect that, but that will be £324 coming in the autumn. Now, from the autumn, anyone who's got an energy meter in their home and is the bill payer will be due a £400 energy discount. That will be split over 6 months, and you'll get a little bit off your bill every month. Ministers will also be paying £300 to pensioners who are eligible for the winter fuel payment, and this will be made in November. If you're on certain disability benefits, there's also £150 available, and that is tax-free. It won't affect your other benefits, and that is due very soon. Actually, that's due to be paid before the end of September. Now, finally, and this is the kind of government's answer, their catch-all answer to people who say, well, this isn't enough, or I fall between the cracks of these pots of money. The government's answer to that currently is the Household Support Fund. So a lot of you will know what that is, but the Household Support Fund is a pot of government money. It's £1.5 billion. It's being divvied up to local councils. The local councils, in turn, then pass that on to people who apply for it. The main thing to remember about the Household Support Fund is that you do have to apply for it. All the other help that the government has announced, by and large, you don't have to apply for it unless there's something that goes wrong with your case. The Household Support Fund, you will need to apply every time. The other thing to remember with the Household Support Fund is that it is a bit of a postcode lottery. Some councils will give you the money in terms of vouchers that you can spend in a supermarket. Others might give you cash. Now, one thing that we have been seeing, quite worrying, is that some councils appear to be running out of money, Household Support Fund money. So if you haven't made an application and you think you might be eligible, look up your local council and how to apply, because it will also vary from council to council, and it is well worth getting that claim in. Now, let's also talk a little bit about what happens when we get a new Prime Minister. So September the 5th, the new Prime Minister is due to be announced. Both the candidates, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, have said that they will do more to help with the rising cost of living. Now, we're a little bit pressed for time, so I won't go into immense detail, but just to summarise, Liz Truss's position has mostly been about tax cuts. We've actually had a comment here from Jane Berry. Thank you, Jane. Jane says, please God, not Liz Truss. Well, I think there's an awful lot of people agree with you there, Jane. And she says tax cuts don't help people on pensions and benefits. That is completely true, and this is a very fair kind of criticism. It's something that we've said at the Mirror, and that a lot of charities, including Martin Lewis, I believe, from Money Saving Expert, have also said, is that this only helps people who are in work and earning. So Liz Truss is leaning more towards tax cuts. When she was pressed on the subject, she wouldn't rule out more kind of pots of money, more payments to help people with the rising cost of living. Rishi Sunak has basically said that he would give in the region of hundreds of pounds extra to help with the rising cost of living, but neither of them have really given any details. And what they do say on this subject, it changes all the time. But I think the main thing to take away is that there almost definitely will be more government help coming down the pipeline with the rising cost of living. When we know more about it, we will let you know, obviously, on the Mirror website with the stories that we do, and in the print paper, and also on these Facebook Lives. We will be running Facebook Lives on that subject, so we can break it all down for you. Now, I think that's about all we've got time for today. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in and for commenting. I hope that you found that helpful. A huge thank you also to consumer champion Isabel Lawrence from Money Magpie. Thank you so much, Isabel. For all the research that you've done, the money saving tips there, really helpful stuff there. Some things there that I certainly didn't know, and I'm going to put into practice. So thank you very much. We're going to be back next Thursday at 1 p.m. with another Cost of Living Facebook Live. I hope to see you all there. Thank you.